Great defeaters, new and old, welcome back to another episode of The Breakdown with your host, BaseDaKID, Tony, the Pugilist Boy, and we are the children of the game. Tony, I'm glad to see you're back out of the hospital, medical facilities, doing well. You had brain scans, we were a little concerned, but they said no, he's okay, he's not allowed to compete. He needs some bed rest. He'll be all right. But as always, he's a professional. He's here on the show with everyone. So, Tony, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well, bro. I'm doing really well. I'm getting super hyped at the moment. Anybody who follows me will see there's been an acceleration of activity in preparation for my trip to Las Vegas for Spence versus Crawford. A fight for the ages. I am in the zone. Let's get it on, in the words of the great late Mills Lane.
I hear you. Well, like I say, you sound in good spirits. Just remember, no sparring. You gotta get your bed rest. You've been told.
How are you, bro?
I'm okay. I mean, I'm a little bit tired today. I'm gonna be honest. I haven't actually done much this week, but as soon as we finish the show, I've actually got to drag myself to the gym because I can't lose the routine. Probably see if I drop a little bit of timber. See where we get to. But otherwise, yeah, things are going well. Decent numbers on the channel, both this channel and my own. Boxing is doing what it needs to do. It's creating headlines, little bits of interesting stories coming out. Can't complain. There's some other little things that I'm not too happy with at the moment outside of boxing and that, but yeah, we can talk about that off air. But yeah, let's greet the great defeaters and let's get the show on the road so that they can be on their way and we can be on ours.
Excellent. So first in the room from very early on, we had Bigsy Biggs. Big up to you, my friend. He has asked us to mention a little bit about David Benavidez, but versus David Morrell. We tend not to go in too much about future fights. But if we get any time, we'll have a little talk maybe about that. Spoker D in the place. Big up to yourself. Michael Januario. Wicked. Nice to see you. North Bank Bren. Big up my fellow North Bankian. Jam Down 187. Yes, sir. As always, in the place. Leonardo Samuel. Dark Side of the Moon. Hot Pies. Big up yourself. And that's it. Let's get going. Poke.
And just before we forget, obviously it was said last week, but we do have to big up and thank Danny Glover from Fight Fan TV for covering the last 3 shows, 2 for me, 1 for you, even though I was there on his first one, just to make sure, I gave him the helping hand when he needed it. But yeah, he's been a great help to the channel the last few weeks, the last month. Obviously, as you guys know, he's a part of the team anyway, just sort of unofficial, just like the rest of you in the chat. So yeah, big up to him and big up to everyone who's always watching, always supporting. G Chain and Chris Collymore, I see you just dropped into the chat, so blessings and respect every single time. Okay, what fight do you want to go with? We do big one and then we do the rest and then we go big one. So where do you want to take it?
Absolutely. So we're going to start off with the UK card, which was originally meant to be Adam Azim, but he had to pull out because of a hand injury. So it was therefore upgraded for Fraser Clarke to have his big hurrah. He was matched up against the seasoned veteran Mariusz Wach. And let's go there, shall we?
Go for it.
Okay, so this was a 10-round heavyweight fight. Fraser Clarke, with a 6-0 record coming in against the very seasoned veteran, 37-9-0. And I think in those 9 losses, he'd only been stopped once. As you can see from the picture, Wach was the taller gentleman, much bigger on the scales, and God, did he use that size against Fraser. Now, unfortunately, for me, here was an opportunity for Fraser to demonstrate some supreme boxing skills against a very immobile opponent, but unfortunately he didn't really do that, and this became although he was defensively quite adept, he didn't get hit with too much. He was able to slip and counter quite a lot in the fight, but he just didn't have anything that made you sit down and say, or stand up and say, "Oh, that looks good," or he's working on this particular part of his arsenal, and he showed it against this slow and ponderous fighter. So he coasted to a 10 round win. He pretty much won every round. Got to give him credit for doing that against, as I said, a seasoned veteran. But as I said, nothing that he did gave me anything to say, where can I move him up the rankings against the likes of the other British heavyweights, the likes of Fabio Wardley, David Adelaide, etc., etc. So pretty unimpressive performance, but he gets the win. We'll see where he goes next. What was your feelings?
Okay, so just to correct you, he's been stopped 4 times out of his 9 victories, but he's only been off his feet once, and that was against Arslanbek Makhmudov. And even that wasn't a straight knockdown. Arslanbek kind of wilted and took a knee just to stop an onslaught. But yeah, he's been stopped 4 times, but always on his feet, always via accumulation, except for the Povetkin one, which was stopped on cuts in the very last round. So yeah, he's a guy that if you could take him off his feet, then that's some doing. So I was indecisive when I did my bet for this fight, and I said to myself, I think Wach goes the distance. He always goes the distance. But the one thing I thought was maybe Clarke might throw a combination at him and sort of get the ref to stop it that way. But I should have went with my first instinct and just done it via did it on decision. It would have made me a bit more money at the time. All good. Overall, I put on Twitter, basically, I'm not even really going to get into a very big breakdown about it. It was a what did I say? Competent yet uninspiring performance, and I agree with that. Unfortunately, like Fraser, I think we kind of see where his ceiling is at the moment. I know they say a lot of people that heavyweights mature differently. They get better or they get worse, but more time when you're like 32, 33, unless you're literally just starting to learn, you are who you are with just a little bit of refinement maybe to come towards like your later years. And so far I feel like with all of the amateur background, sticking in the amateurs for so long, almost developing that 3-round style, it just doesn't really seem like he's gonna adapt to a fully fledged pro of any note above British, European at best, which I've said previously. He hasn't done anything that sort of made me think differently. I said that the best thing for him to do with this fight would be to box. Not so much to box from the outside, but to not get involved in the clinches up in close, not fall in, not lean into Wach, because ultimately that guy, even if you think you might be the stronger guy, you're still over a stone lighter than him, and he's got height, reach, and just overall size on you. So he's just going to be leaning on you, draining your energy, and for you to push him off, it's just going to take extra, sort of extra energy that you don't even know if you have. You combine that with the fact that obviously it was extremely hot in the York Hall, and I know that firsthand because I was there the week before, and the week before it wasn't as hot outside as it was this week. So yeah, I knew it would be a bit difficult, especially for the bigger guys. So again, he did well to get through the 10 without any real adversity. But there was definitely, to me, rounds that you could say that he lost. I think the 3rd or the 4th round was one of those ones where you could maybe give an argument to that. I think the 7th was, a bit touch and go, and I feel like he definitely lost the 10th. So while he managed the rounds and kind of obviously he was comfortable and knew what he was doing, again, I feel like, not saying this is his level, but I don't feel like he gets he goes much further than this, in my personal opinion. But hey, we all speculate and see who's right and who's wrong at the end of the day. But yeah, that's all I really got to say about it.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that I would say with Fraser Clarke is if you look at his amateur record, and I'm not sure how accurate it is on BoxRec, he had 68, he had 90 plus amateur fights, of which he won 68 and lost 25. Now, with 68 wins, you'd think he'd have a decent knockout ratio. He actually only KO'd 9 people in the amateurs. So he ain't a hard hitter. You know, when you look at like some of the other guys that have come through the amateurs and you see what they were doing, you know, they were absolutely tearing through people. So, you know, the writing's kind of on the wall for Fraser Clarke, unfortunately, because he's not a heavy hitter. You know, he's as you said, the age he ain't on the right side of the age situation at 31 now, coming up 32. I just feel his level is probably going to be, you know, a year or two at British and European level at best, probably.
Cool. I'm happy to move on and sort of keep the show rolling, unless you want to answer any questions from the chat.
Jam Down says, I was hoping to see him at least give Wach a moment of concern. I'm confident Wardley wouldn't have given Wach a proper scare, if not get a 10 count. I don't see Wardley doing that either, because you've just got to understand that Mariusz Wach is a lump, and you know, very few people have the capability to knock down a guy like Wach. So
again, you don't have to knock him down. You could. He said a moment of concern, so it could be a little bit of a barrage, maybe.
Yeah,
so.
and he's and of course he isn't getting any younger, so you know. Danny says amateurs, most fighters, even big punching pros, don't have big KO ratios in the amateurs. Well, you could say that, but then look at Anthony Joshua's KO ratio as an amateur. You know, there are guys out there. Dillian White couldn't hurt Wach as well. So yeah, we kind of know what he's about. But anyway, I think that fight has had enough of our time. Let's move on to the rest of that card. Just trying to bring up the next. Caroline Dubois was on that card. She won via via points decision over Yanina Del Carmen Lescano. I did have a clip of this, of her dropping Lescano. Was it the 5th round?
Yeah, it was round 5.
Right. I did have a clip, but unfortunately I forgot to load it.
That's all right.
Do you want to tell us about what your feelings were in relation to Caroline's most recent outing?
Yeah, I mean, look, Caroline done what I expected her to do. She basically won most of every second of every round, which is no mean feat against Yanina Lescano. She's a very tough, very durable Argentinian. So I pretty much was very confident that Caroline would not be able to actually get a stoppage. The one way I would have predicted her to get that would have been investing in the body work, because Argentinians seem to be very, very strong in terms of cranium. So you really don't knock them out, but to the body, it's apparently they seem to be a bit more defensively irresponsible and a bit sort of a bit fragile. And with Caroline's body work, I felt that was where she was maybe going to get that success. And I think in the second round, she hurt Lescano to the body quite visibly. And I think looking at that, I said, okay, this could potentially be how she gets it done. But Lescano made the necessary adjustments that she needed to make, tucked her arms a little bit lower down, hunkered forward just enough so that she could get gloves in front of face, and elbows into the body to be able to sort of defend some of those body shots. And every time that Caroline threw punches, as soon as those punches went back to her, the Lascano would come in and try to throw something of her own to make Caroline either have to move or have to throw another punch to keep her off, or to keep her constantly engaged in the fight. So, Caroline obviously is used to working at her pace. She was forced to work a little bit harder than she would normally. And that's part of the reason why you bring in, like, the Mexicans, the Argentinians, the Ecuadorians, and everyone like that, just because they have that high altitude location where they train. So they've just got those gas tanks and make their opponent just have to work and have to continue. Caroline did very well. She constantly kept her lead foot on the outside of Yanina's. So she was always in range to sort of get her shots off. She never threw from distance. She was always fairly in close. There was very few times where she threw from outside of range or missed a shot wildly just based on placement in the ring. So yeah, she done very, very well in that fight. You could tell that she was starting to feel it from about round 6 onwards, because at that point is when Yanina actually started pressing the pace on her just a little bit, catching her with shots in between shots, and then Caroline would have to sort of fight her off. You could kind of see in between in the corner she was taking really, really deep, heavy breaths, almost begging for water at times. So it was an experience for her, but it's one I think that stands her in very good stead. She's still one of the best prospects in the world at this point, and I would put her as, at the moment, I'd give her a top 5 ranking in the lightweight division. That's a bit bold, but I would say that she's good enough to be classed as a top 5. She's definitely a top 10 already, and the lightweight is a very deep division. She just needs a couple more rounds, a couple more experience fights, and then she'll be good to go for those titles. And I can definitely see her also being a multi-weight champion moving forward. So yeah, I was impressed, but Lascano also deserves a lot of credit, because she was game, she didn't come to lay down. She came to fight, and Caroline was in a fight, even though she won it fairly comfortably.
Cool. I mean, she's currently ranked by BoxRec #1 in Britain, #3 in the world at lightweight. So yeah, you're pretty much on point when you say that, she's very high, fairly high ranked, and should be not too far away from world title opportunities. Obviously, this was her second fight of the year, having had her first fight in February. What do you see her path to glory over the next year? I mean, 1-2 more fights this year and then the world title, or do you think they push her fast enough that she gets a crack this year?
No, she definitely needs another 2, but ultimately she won't get a world title shot until Katie Taylor vacates the belts, because she's not in a mandatory position yet, I believe. And realistically, because Katie makes them a lot of money in the women's code, they're not going to force Katie to have to do mandatories with any of the sanctioning bodies. She's very diligent with doing her mandatories, so she's pretty much done all of them already. So I don't think the next one she would have imparted on her would be until maybe like either the end of this year, like December or January next year. She pretty much always does the mandatories between the big fights. So you're not just gonna force a mandatory shot right now. But yeah, I feel like she's 2 more fights of a good level, like step her up. Maybe if she has one more sort of, not keep busy, but one more sort of building fight, and then see if she can maybe get the fight with Michaela Mayer, which is what she's after, or someone of that ilk, and then go campaign for a mandatory position for one of the titles, sort of February, March next year. I mean, she's still only 22. There's no rush at all.
Yeah.
And she'll be a reigning champion, I feel, and clean up for quite a while. moving forward. Obviously, the biggest problem she's gonna have or she's gonna run into is my girl Beatrice Ferreira. So she's I think that the longer that she can sort of stay away from that smoke at this particular time, it will stand her in good stead. But she definitely got time on her side when it comes to that fight.
Yeah, cool. So let's move on. The next fight I want to talk on, again, I don't have video of it. I got a picture, but was Isaac Chamberlain was on the bill fighting Dylan Breguion. This was an 8-rounder. So bearing in mind that he was supposed to be fighting for the British title against Mikhail Lawal, this obviously then becomes a tune-up or a warm-up interim fight for him, which he wins comfortably. I mean, to me, he's so wound down from the Lawal fight that his performance kind of just stutters across the line. You know, he's not doing anything. Again, very much in a Fraser, big Fraser sort of vein. He's not doing anything in the fight that makes you think, oh, he's been working on a specific aspect of his game, which he can now bring back to the table against the big boys of the division. You know, and when you consider who the big boys are, you know, we saw both of us were at the fight last week with Chef Clarke, looked destructive in taking out his opponent in what was a pre-eliminator for the British title.
Mm-hmm.
And then Isaac has an opportunity to impress this week against a lesser foe in my eyes. Tell me if I'm wrong.
I think you're wrong. Daniel Breguion, he's competent. He's a good he's a good European level guy. Like he's one of those guys that at European level he loses to the credible guys, but he gives everyone a tough fight and he goes the distance with most people. He had a decent fight with Chris Smith a couple of years ago. So he's credible in that sense. And you also got to remember that he wasn't even the guy that he was supposed to be fighting. He was supposed to be fighting Daniel Paszynski, and he pulled out, and Breguion sort of came in last minute. You've got the factor that plus the fact that he had peaked for the Bournemouth card and then had to maintain that for a further 3 weeks after being out of the ring for like a year with obviously the broken eye socket from last year. So I'm not as down on the performance, knowing obviously the history, but I guess if you just look at it in a vacuum, it wasn't the greatest of performances, but he got it done. And that will at least stand him in good stead. He can have a break, have a holiday, and then sort of get back to it. I think that fight with Lawal is supposed to be scheduled roughly for about September, August time now. I mean September, October.
So Danny from Fight Fan actually got to speak to Isaac afterwards, and he said he overcooked himself keeping his weight down for so long, which messed up his energy levels and sharpness as he peaked for Bournemouth. Just exactly as you just mentioned there, Base.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, he gets his sort of cobwebs off. He's got himself back out live in front of the lights and the cameras. But yeah, I think he's got to get back in the ring pretty soon, in my eyes. Obviously, if that Lawal fight does come off, then great. But I think he's going to need to be at a much higher rate if he wants to win that, and then obviously go on to bigger and better things. And of course, as I said, Chef Clarke is, looking pretty hot right now, coming up through the ranks himself.
All right. Well, speaking of Chef Clarke, he was in the building, and I think he was probably more in the building to have a look at Vidal Riley as opposed to Isaac Chamberlain, but you never know. So let's go into the Vidal Riley fight real quick.
Go ahead.
So, did you watch this one?
I did, yeah.
Okay, cool. So I was at the original Riley Taj fight, which was a lot more competitive looking. Even obviously it was stopped on the cut. Taj sort of never landed super duper on Riley throughout that first fight, but it was a lot more competitive in nature. Riley had to be a lot more switched on. This one, Riley is almost like, because he said, "I know this opponent now." He turned the screw from the first round. His jab was very effective. When he was just using it as a deterrent from Taj to try and sneak in. He was moving his feet very well. He was turning himself counterclockwise throughout the entire time. I think he was going from right to left, which was making it was making Taj have to turn in a way that's not normally natural to a regular orthodox fighter. They normally like to sort of angle their body in the opposite direction, and I think Riley knew that his movement wouldn't be as sharp, so he was using that as a way to offset and to sort of keep him blinded, and then he was letting that right hand go. He never straightened it up. He very rarely sort of straightened up the right hand, but he looped it enough that Taj just couldn't really defend against it. It was quick, it was accurate for the most part, and it was landing at will, sort of for the first couple rounds, the first 2-3 rounds. It was only at the point of the fourth round where I felt like Vidal Riley maybe was taking a bit of a break from sort of towards the back end of the third, and Taj thought, okay, he sort of expended as much of his energy. I've taken his shots; they're not really hurting me too tough. Now I can try and press the action, and that's what he did do. Tried to press it. He caught Vidal Riley with a good few shots in the fourth round, some overhands which sort of buzzed Riley a little bit. So he had to use his legs, move around, try and sort of get his bearings. But then he was investing in body work from earlier, but he decided, okay, let me dig to that body a little bit heavier right now. And at that point, he did a couple punches which maybe strayed a slightly just below the waistband. Not majorly, but there was enough that it paused Anis Taj in his tracks. He got a little bit of time from the ref, took a bit of that time, but then that was pretty much all she wrote, because Riley realized, okay, well, he was hurt there, which means now the body is where my attack's going. And pretty much for the whole rest of that round, he just aimed at that body, and to the point where Taj got very uncomfortable, started complaining that the ref that they were still low. At this point, they weren't, but they must have just felt it, because he was feeling residuals from that earlier slightly low shot. He turned to the ref. He did the cardinal sin. Didn't keep his eyes on his opponent. Wasn't protecting himself. Got caught with a massive left hook, which slid him down the ropes. And then he was very fortunate that the subsequent left uppercut missed the mark while he was at the bottom. And it would have been a legit shot, because neither of his gloves nor his knees or his bottom or anything was actually on the floor at that time. So he was still technically on his feet. So if that shot had have connected, I don't think he would have even got up at the end of that salvo. But he got up. He said, "Yeah, I'm fine." The ref let him back out. He took one, I think it was a jab. It wasn't even a backhand, but he took a flush jab to the face, walked to the, got pushed back to the ropes, and then the towel flew in, and the ref stopped it then and there. And it was a correct stoppage. He wasn't gonna. It was only going to get worse for him. He was definitely going to hit the canvas if it didn't get stopped then. So to me, it was a really good performance from Vidal Riley. I called for Riley versus Clarke next. Both one wants a mandatory for the British, the other one is looking at the English. He wants to go through the correct steps, but I think that's a perfect fight. October Red disagreed and said nope, she thinks that Vidal Riley needs his step up fight first. I disagree, and I think he's had more fights than Chev Clarke as a professional now anyway, so you might as well, plus he was to me, I believe, a more decorated amateur, or at least had a lot more of an amateur career. So to me, it's even, and I would like to see that fight. I know it's not one that's likely to happen with politics and whatnot, but hey, I'd be all for watching it. But yeah, that was my thoughts on it.
Yeah. First and foremost, Anis Taj has got to be the oldest looking 27-year-old I've ever seen. I lie?
I mean, I'm not going to argue with you.
The man at 27 looks older than me, but you know what? Look, a boxer is a boxer, and I have to give him ultimate credit because he goes in and does the hard work in training camp, and he came to fight. He came to fight. He's a rhythm fighter. You can see by the way he's on his toes constantly, and by no stretch of the imagination did he make. He knew, as you said, they've been there before, so you kind of know what to expect. And I definitely felt like Taj was like, yeah, I know what you're going to come with, and therefore I've got the antidote for you. So he was looking for that count overhand right. He caught him he caught Vidal Riley a couple of times with it nicely. But Vidal is a very good boxer. For some reason, his style of boxing somehow just reminds me of Dan Aziz. I'm not sure why, but they both have a similar type jab. Very fast hands, deceptively fast hands, in fact. So yeah, I mean, a fight against Chev Clarke would be an interesting one because to me, Chev sits more on his punches, whereas Vidal, more of a in and out kind of type guy, utilizing that jab, which he's got, which is very, very effective at times. He goes up and down from the body to the head. And then obviously, he doubles up on it, which I like. Again, for those that know me, I'm a coach, and I'm always telling people the advantage of doubling up on your jab. It can open up your fighter. It can create damage to the face if you throw it strong and hard. And look, the cut on the eye of Riley, he was getting hit constantly with an overhand right from Vidal Riley. Once Riley smelt blood, he was like, "Yeah, I'm going for that." So this was an entertaining short fight. As we know, it was stopped on the cut, but
no, the first one was stopped on the cut, not this one.
Yeah. So it was a good fight. I enjoyed it.
Wait, Tony, what fight are you referring? You know that the first one was the one stopped on the cut, not this one, right? This one was a legit.
Yeah. I'm getting them mixed up.
Okay.
Yeah. It was a good entertaining fight. Don't worry, I know what I'm talking about.
I hope so. All right, well, let me save you. Let's move on to another fight because we got there's still quite a few left to go. So where do you want to take it next? So we're gonna go to Matchroom or we're gonna go to Showtime?
Let's do Matchroom. Because to me, there was only really 2 fights on this card that I watched.
That's a shame because, to be honest, the entire card itself was entertaining. Like, I'm not going to say it was the greatest matches or the biggest names because it wasn't. But apart from the main event, every other fight was actually more of was competitive and was fairly action-packed. All right, let's just go through some of the undercard fights first, like in the sort of before the bell. So you had Ginny Fuchs against they changed their name now. They call her Rodriguez now, but India Smith. So I think it's just India Rodriguez at the moment. That was a really good fight. It was Ginny Fuchs's third fight as a pro. Very decorated amateur on the women's scene in America. Pretty much she controlled that fight from the start to finish, even though she was having to work because India Smith is very scrappy, a very, very scrappy fighter. So that was a little good performance from her. Aaron Aponte suffered his first defeat. I felt it was a little bit harsh. I thought that he did enough just to win, but he was allowing himself to get outworked and sat on the ropes too much against Xavier Madrid. And yeah, the guy was 4-2 and he was 6-0-1 at the time. No, he was 7-0-1 at the time. So really and truly, he should have come through that, but I never really thought Aponte was anything great to begin with. Yeah, his team's trying to match him tough, but just having a look at that, the fact that he's young says, okay, he might still be able to make something of himself, but he doesn't look to me of the same shakes as like a Mark Castro or a Diego Pacheco or a Ray Ford or sort of, you know, anyone within that team. I don't think he's really the guy for them to hang their hopes on. I think he was in the super welterweight division, although I could be very wrong on that. I can't even remember what else was on that particular. Then there was, I think,
Calderon.
Yeah, the one we're getting to that. I'm trying to think of I think it was Mark Too Sharp Davis against
Jeremy Hill.
That's it, Jeremy Hill. That was a nice little fight for as long as it lasted. Brutal knockout by Jeremy Hill. Mark Davis, I think they said he'd been out of the ring for like 8 years. This was like his second fight back in 8 years' time. He was tidy, but from the lack of KO power he had, you just kind of felt, and being the smaller guy, the writing was going to be on the wall. And yeah, it ended up getting finished in devastating fashion. But it was a nice little, it was a good watch. Then you had Shakram Gearsov against Calderon, I can't remember his first name. What was it? Harold Calderon. That's the one. He was 27-0, I believe. And Gearsov was 13-0, but Gearsov was just levels above. So you could kind of tell that Calderon, you know, he had his record based off of maybe very lower level fights, which you can't really necessarily blame him for. He's a bit of an unknown commodity in a very specific part of that country. Maybe there's just not a great depth of quality there. He might be on the club circuit, he just had to take a lot of whatever fights he could get. Southpaw, so there was a little bit of problems with Gearsov getting to him initially. He was, you know, pretty good on the back foot, fairly defensively responsible, but Gearsov just pressed the action, you know, sort of stayed on the periphery of his vision, popped that jab, double jabbed, hit him with the backhand to the stomach several times, caught him upstairs on a few occasions as well, and he just showed that he was levels above. So he needs a step up moving forward. Not a huge one, because there's still no necessary rush for Gearsov, but he's a top quality amateur, and he's turning into a decent quality professional, and he's definitely got the necessary skills to sort of take it where he needs to take it.
Would you say that was a fight worth watching?
For someone like you, yeah. For someone like you, I think it was a fight worth watching, because it showed he had to work out several different things in that fight. He was the smaller guy, so he had to work out how to get his entry. He had to work out how to stay comfortable in defense and attack. So I'd say from a film study point of view, it was good, and it was a decent enough watch. Like I said, I think it's something that you would enjoy.
Why was that a 12-rounder? Because I can't see a title on the card.
I think it was a regional. It was like one of those regional titles.
Okay.
But that being said, I mean, Gearsov needs to have those, because I think he's stepping up to final eliminators coming up.
Yeah, rank number 12 currently.
Those 10 and 12s, just to make sure he's got that knowledge for when he hits the necessary round. But to me, I don't have an issue with any fight being a 12-rounder. It shows, you know, that you're willing to be a championship level fighter, or that you're taking the fights at the right time, not necessarily, you know, reducing the level of rounds like some of our, you know, maybe better known fighters would like to do in that situation. Right, so now that we kind of just had a little brief run through of all of that, let's get to what probably should have been the co-main event of that card, which is Ramla Ali versus Julissa Alejandro Guzman. I'm gonna let you start on this one, and then I'm gonna give my takes afterwards, because if anyone watched my basis picks, you will pretty much know that the fight played out almost exactly as I predicted, minus who won. But go for it.
Okay. So this was an interesting fight because I didn't know too much about Julissa Alejandra Guzman, but she's clearly a banger. You know, she's got very strong hands. She clearly was bigger than Ramla Ali by the time they got in the ring. You know, it did look like a catchweight competition between, you know, like a middleweight and a lightweight, because Guzman is just that much bigger a frame, upper body wise, probably even from the legs as well. But you know, Ramla, you know, she is known as, you know, she has got very good boxing skills, and she has of late been trying to sit down a little bit more on her punches, working her combinations. But on this occasion, she found herself in a you know, in a bad situation against somebody who was able to bang back just as well. So this fight started off with Ramla Ali utilizing her boxing skills really well, using her combinations, winning a good couple of rounds. And then as we got into round 3 and 4, that's when Guzman started to get closer and start to get to the body of Ramla Ali and start to hurt Ramla. And she dropped her in the 5th, was it?
Yeah.
5th round, yeah. And the writing was on the wall from then. Ramla got up, she got through the round, she came back, corner, you know, did the work to get her back in good shape, and she actually came back and she won round 6 and 7 for me, but then started getting into what I feel was a comfortable situation where she was starting to trade with Guzman. And then that wasn't gonna, you know, what she really needed to do was continue boxing from a distance. She was getting into scraps or getting into close quarters with Guzman, and you could see at some point, you know, look, Guzman, if she gets her, is gonna hurt her. And so I'll put that footage back on because the end of the fight was quite devastating. Obviously, Guzman's younger. She's 26 compared to Ramla, 33. But yeah, it was a horrible stoppage. I mean, she did get up from getting flat out, but she was obviously in no condition to continue. But the knockout itself was a sweet 1-2, right hook, left hook, in between the shots of Ali. As you can see, Ali was, you know, letting her own hands go at the time, but effectively, Guzman picks her shot in between the flurry that Ramla was throwing. Right hook, left hook, boom, and it's all over.
Just to answer this comment from Fight Fan, actually, no, Ramla's, I think, is less than an inch taller than Guzman. You see them when they did the picture side by side, and even the face off, they were pretty much eye line to each other. So she's not that much taller, but she's definitely much smaller of frame. So my my assessment of the fight, pretty much, I said that Ramla would have to employ movement side to side. Every time that she would pick a shot, 1 or 2 at a time, angle off, and not allow Guzman to set her feet to throw her shots. And what Ramla was doing, especially in the first 2 rounds, because she was quicker, and Guzman looked like she wasn't really it didn't like she was able to sort of catch her with anything. Ramla was staying in there a little bit quicker than a little bit longer than she would need to, and then she was just about evading sort of when something was coming back. But she felt that she was having success, like she was snapping Guzman's head back with the jab, with the backhand at times. But every time Guzman came forward, Ramla was stopping from being able to let her set her feet. So she was moving a bit more in and out and not staying too much in the pocket. But basically from the 3rd round, because she felt, okay, this girl's too slow for me, she started to hold her feet a bit more. And that's basically where the issue came, because she caught a big overhand right in the third. It was a counter overhand right after she was throwing shots. And even though her shots had landed, they weren't of the same power. But not only that, like, she wasn't braced to take that shot. And I feel that was the first one that sort of wobbled her. And you saw that she started to move backwards with her hands up for like the rest of the third round. And she was then trying to become sort of the counter puncher and punch in between Guzman's shots. But that just doesn't work when you don't have the same level of power as your opponent does. So third round, that's pretty much what happened. Fourth round was exactly the same. Like Guzman, she just started timing Ramla. Ramla was staying and trading a bit too much. And I think her team initially said to her, no, sit in the pocket and beat her to the punch. But I think they was planning on having her stay closer to Guzman, so Guzman couldn't throw like a shot from distance or mid-range. Like they wanted her to be either close to her or they wanted her to be out of range. And Ramla was just sitting mid-range at that point, and that's why she was starting to get touched to the head with those overhands. And also Guzman was digging to the body as well. Like, you know, she realized that the body was the place to go, considering how slim and petite Ramla Ali is as a person. Then there's not necessarily a lot of meat there to be able to absorb those shots. And yeah, that's pretty much what happened in there. You go to the fifth round. Ramla Ali at this point, it's almost like she's trying to prove that she's as tough as a girl. She's fighting. She's trying to fight fire with fire, but she's throwing shots from angles where she can't land. But she's giving the opponent options, and her opponent is better from landing at distance than she is. So she threw herself off balance, missed her shot initially, and that's why she ended up getting caught with the straight right from Guzman, which pushed her onto her back heels and ended up making her fall over. She was lucky that the bell came at the end of that, because she was still getting rocked a bit. Round 6 and 7, they told her, look, hit and move, like 1 or 2 at a time. Keep your legs moving. But I noticed from almost the end of the second round, Ramla Ali's legs looked stiff. Like there was no real spring in them, either to the point where she was trying to sit down or she just didn't have the fluidity. Something had taken its toll on her from early. And she did well to control the pace of the 6th and the 7th round and sort of to win those, but she was still taking heavy shots at the same time. And that's unfortunately kind of was the undoing. And then as we see, when it got into the 8th round, she got greedy. Again, she thought that she was doing a lot better than she actually was against Guzman. Guzman was still very comfortable in there, even though her face was a bit marked up and cut up. And then Ramla just stayed in there and tried to throw a 6-punch combination when she should have been out of there after the third. She was lucky the right hook missed, and she still stayed there trying to throw punches, even though at that point Guzman's body was ready to angle towards that left hook. And ultimately, as you're going to see from here, that's exactly what happened. And yeah, down for the count. One thing I will say, even though it didn't really make a huge difference, I did mention it on the weekend wrap, that referee's count was extremely fast. I mean, he started counting at 4 before the 2 count, basically. I think she was getting counted before she'd even hit the ground. He looks over and he's on 4 long before, I think before even the 4th official or the outside official. So, and it was almost like he thought, okay, I want this to be a legit knockout, but I need this fight to be over because she can't sustain another one like that. But yeah, I thought the count was very fast. But that being said, I mean, it wasn't going to change. Even if she did get up, she would have got rocked, or they would have thrown in the towel pretty much straight away, or the ref would have called it because she was in no condition to continue. But I give her a credit because she did try to get up. It's not like I'm going to stay down and then try to spring up on the 9 or the 10. No, she was actively trying to get up. She just couldn't.
Not like a Ryan Garcia then.
Nope, nothing like a Ryan Garcia. But we're not gonna revisit that old wounds.
I gotta be honest though. I mean, the more I look at the way she fell, it looks really bad. She bangs the back of her head on the canvas.
No, she doesn't. If you look, she's lucky that number one, her leg gets trapped underneath her, and she hits her coccyx, at the bottom of her glutes. So so that hits the ground, and because that hits and shudders, she kind of rolls back, so her head doesn't actually bang. So she's very lucky that the head doesn't bang, but it's because she dropped straight down onto her bottom, basically, which avoided the head. If she had been angled any further back from that shot, she would have banged the head, and it would have been lights out. She wouldn't have got up at all. Like I said, it was a very bad knockout overall. I don't know how that will affect her moving forward. Let's be real. She's not the youngest of girls, so there could be those demons might be a bit harder to overcome. If she gets hit by someone else, maybe whether they're as big a puncher or not as Guzman, does she have flashbacks? Does she not stick to a game plan? Does she panic? There's all of that, plus all the outside stuff that she's got going on. The first woman to be this, first woman to do that, all the modeling. Like, is there just maybe too much going on where she's not fully invested? And now, maybe has this girl taken her heart? Has she taken her soul? We don't know. I think that she'll still kind of stick around, but I don't know if she'll get to the level that maybe they was hoping she would previously. She might have to employ a bit more of an amateur style and forget about trying to be a power puncher now. Because even though she did develop some power, when it comes up to these girls, she's always going to come off second best.
Yeah. So to people who may not know Ramla Ali that well, but she's the subject of a sort of fly on the wall documentary, right?
Yeah.
Do you know much about what that's about, and how much that's taken out of her, perhaps?
I mean, I don't know a huge amount about it as such, but I know that obviously it just details her different ventures into. I think she does a little bit of philanthropy at the moment. Obviously, that she's doing her modeling, she's doing her boxing, she's championing, obviously women's rights, and she's speaking up about things that happen in some of the third world countries, especially places like sort of Somalia, where she's come from, like the war-torn effort. So look, there's a lot of things, and her mind may not be focused on boxing as a whole, which, to be fair, someone like her, as unique as she is, like looks wise and all the different avenues and the different metrics that she can hit, boxing probably shouldn't be the first thing on your mind. When boxing is really one of those sports that they, it's that opportunity for someone to get themselves out of the gutter almost, to a lot of the time, or to teach discipline or teach that. So when you get to a point, someone like her, who maybe it was a very good outlet at the start of her life when things were going wrong, or she had to flee war-torn Somalia and sort of that kind of aspect, but now that she's got everything else, maybe it's just not where she needs to be. She might have the desire, but maybe she's just not got that, that overall hunger and grit that it takes. And we don't know. This is speculation. Like I said, I think she will come back. I just don't know if she will be the same person. Has some of the confidence now been knocked out of her, knowing that can happen to her, because it's never been close to happening to her before. So.
Yeah. Cool. All right, so we move on to the main event of the card, which was, of course, headlined by Regis Prograis defending his world title against Zorrilla.
Danielito, Zorrilla. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, where we at? So this was, to me, a very frustrating fight to watch. It appeared to me that Danielito Zorrilla did not come to fight. He was intent on surviving. He was basically moving around the outside, bouncing around the outside, didn't engage more than once or twice around. And he basically had Regis Prograis on the chase for the entire fight. Zorrilla seemed to think that if I hit you 3 or 4 times in a round and then just run around and you don't hit me, I'm going to win. But he doesn't realize that, there's a thing called aggression, which Regis is getting points for. Now, Regis, on the other hand, isn't the Regis of old. I'm looking at this guy and thinking to myself, where is that old Regis who was an absolute dominator in the ring? He knew how to stay on the chest of a fighter. He was very good at counter punching. All work, all business. That wasn't what I was seeing on Saturday night with this performance. To the point that he throws like 1,000 jabs and lands 10. I mean, I don't know what he was doing, throwing that jab into midair consistently. This incident that you can see on screen right now, technically, I don't know what you felt, Base. Did you feel this should have been a knockdown?
Oh no, it was a clear knockdown.
That's
the only thing, I mean, I can't see the top of Zorrilla's body, so I don't know if after the shot he pushed into him, but he didn't step on his foot, he didn't knock his leg or anything. So yeah, to me it was a legit knockdown, and even
to me it was a legit knockdown.
Regis said I think it was it looked like a knockdown on the screen. So
so the referee called it as a push. Both fighters ended up on the floor. But yeah, this is one of the few occasions in the fight where you can see Regis has got Zorrilla against the ropes and he's able to tee off. And, Regis was looking for the knockout all night. He was winging in wide punches. As you can see, those punches are coming from Mississippi. He did hurt Zorrilla from time to time, but he wasn't able to do it consistently because Zorrilla, exercised his footwork and ensured that he stayed away from the power shots of Regis. Obviously, this was a southpaw against an orthodox, so Zorrilla had done his homework and knew that he had to move to the wrong side of Regis's straight left and his hooks. So yeah, as I said, overall, I thought it was a fairly frustrating fight because I didn't think Regis was anywhere near the levels that I'd seen of him previously. As I said, I didn't think Zorrilla came to fight. His tactics to me were very negative. It was a difficult one to score. If you look at the scoring, one judge gave the fight to Zorrilla and two gave it tightly to Regis Prograis. Or was it the other way around?
They were very wide scorecards.
Wide to Prograis, tight for Zorrilla. That was it. 114, 113 for Zorrilla, and then wide scores for Prograis. And it was somewhat of a mystery how that scoring occurred. We've talked about scoring of late recently where, there are swing rounds. On this occasion, I didn't see that. I saw this was a clear win for Regis Prograis. I don't know what you think, but to me, Zorrilla didn't bring nearly enough to be able to win this fight.
I guess, look, if we use the metric of you have to rip the title away from the champion, then no, he didn't do enough. But if you just go on basic principles of boxing, hit and not get hit, then realistically, I think he did outland Regis in most rounds. I mean, could he have won it? Should he have maybe got the decision? I think maybe he could have, but I guess it's one of those ones. It just wasn't. He didn't do enough for, I guess, the people watching and I guess they was counting effective aggression, even though not a lot of Regis's aggression was effective. The one thing that I think was actually shambolic is that both of the judges that scored it to Regis, they both gave him the second round. He didn't land one punch in the entire second round. He got hit, I think, 3 or 4 times in that round. And he didn't land a shot. He threw shots. He was obviously on the front foot active, but he literally missed every shot. I think the most he did was graze the body towards the back end once. And he got given that round, which is peculiar. But outside of that, I mean, look, I'll be honest, I've barely watched the fight twice. The first time I watched it, I was like half asleep, so I wasn't even paying attention. And then I was trying to watch it before we came on, and again, I was distracted doing other things, and it just didn't really keep my interest. So I never scored the fight at any point. I'm not going to go back and try and score it and justify whatever. Regis won. Regis was supposed to win. Unfortunately, that's just how it is. That Zorrilla wasn't supposed to come here and upset the apple cart. Move on to bigger and better things. Devin Haney, Jack Catterall, or whomever else, maybe go try and get that vacant WBO if and when Tszyu officially relinquishes it, because apparently it hasn't been done just yet. Or try and do a unification if possible. So I don't know. I don't really particularly want to speak too much more about it. If you want to go into the chat and just pull up any comments, cool. But we can get to the Tim Tszyu fight.
Yeah, that was 100% a knockdown, says Norbert Bren. He also says, I was surprised to see Regis struggle to get the opening. Didn't faint like he used to. G-Chain says he was so lackluster, bro, but Zorrilla was on a spoiler settings.
I mean, the one thing I will say is, look, it was, for both of them, to be fair, it was very short notice. Like, Regis had 6 weeks. It was like sort of 6.5 weeks preparation for the fight. Yeah, he was in the gym, but maybe he needed a little bit longer to make weight better, to have more energy. So Rio was a 3-week opponent. I think 3.5 weeks, because he wasn't the original guy. So maybe he felt like he was undercooked as well. It could have been one of those situations. So I'm prepared to give both guys the benefit of the doubt to a degree. Regis obviously had the pressure of the homecoming on him as well, which he kept. He did mention numerous times after the fight. That was sort of weighing on him a little bit. And Zorrilla, maybe he felt that he didn't have the resistance. He didn't have good enough training camp to be able to actually sit and try and bang with Regis a bit more than he did. No, I don't want to necessarily see him again on that performance, but having seen his previous performances, a couple of them, he doesn't normally fight like that. So I have to assume it was a one-off. So I'm prepared to obviously give him another chance if I see his name on the card again, but I doubt it will be a matchroom one.
Cool. All right. So that leaves us into the Showtime card, which was headlined by Tim Tszyu fighting for the WBO interim world super welterweight title against Carlos Ocampo. Now, I didn't see any of the undercard. Sorry.
No, before we get to that, let's go to. If you didn't see it, fine. But I'll just give a quick shout out. So Sam Goodman versus Rais Salim. That was a good, interesting fight. Basically, just a real quick one. Rais Salim he picked up pretty much 5 out of the 6 rounds in the first half, maybe 4-2, but he was pretty dominant in the first half of the fight. I predicted he would actually win via points decision, but Sam Goodman, I'd never seen him before. I'd never heard his name, but I'm going to keep an eye on him. He's a very, very good, very technical fighter. Even though he was losing those rounds, he was on the back foot for a lot of it, trying to sort of counter. And I think he was maybe trying to drain a little bit of Rais Salim's energy based on obviously having to travel, around the world to go to Australia from the US. And his corner told him, look, you need to win. You need to pick it up in these last 5 or 6 rounds. And I think literally from the 7th round, because it was a 12-rounder, from the 7th round onwards, he stepped on the front foot. He literally walked Rais Salim down, and he just basically beat him up with volume. He didn't have the power necessarily to necessarily hurt him, but he did catch him a few times and cause Rais Salim some issues. But he just made Rais Salim have to work. And every time Rais got desperate and started telegraphing left hooks from basically from the back of the arena for Sam Goodman to be able to just slip and counter and roll back in with like 2-3 shots of his own. It was an output very much similar to someone like Vasily Lomachenko when he used to go on the front foot and you try and catch a break and he just catch you with a little combination. He spin off to the side, hit you with a couple more. You try to get out of the offense, and as soon as you're backing up, he almost leaps in with like a leaping jab to get back into range and just stays on your chest and just makes you have to work. It was a very, very good performance, and he dominated the whole back end of the fight. 12th round was a little competitive, but ultimately he won it quite clearly, sort of like a 116, 112, 115, 113. but Sam Goodman, that's a name to definitely keep an eye on moving forward. That was a very, very good performance. And if you haven't watched it, Tony, I will send you a video. You can watch that fight.
My guy, respect.
Okay. Right, yeah. So now let's move to Tszyu versus Carlos Ocampo. I'll let you take this one. There's not much to talk about, so go for it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So this was a 77-second destruction. I think my highlights are probably a little bit longer, but Guzman, sorry, not Guzman, Ocampo came out looking to match Tszyu's intensity, because Tszyu obviously on his home soil came out, big crowd behind him, as they always do when they're on home soil in Australia. The thing I noticed, look at that picture, Tim looks a bit fleshy to me. You know, I've noticed this in previous fights. He's not like your svelte kind of boxer. He's quite comfortable carrying a little bit of excess weight around.
You know what that means, Tony? That means that he makes the weight very comfortably.
Very comfortably, indeed, indeed. But yeah, he has got power in both hands, and he came out with like a salvo that caught the attention of Ocampo very quickly, and Ocampo then tried to fight fire with fire, to his detriment, because essentially Tim was then, as you can see, he's catching him with that overhand right, but he was looking at, you know, the uppercut earlier in the fight, in the round, you know, he was catching him body and head, but this was the finish of the fight. Caught him that left hook, slumped him, as you can see, and that was the end of the fight. But the first shot that dropped him was also an overhand right. Tszyu, very impressive. The power is definitely there. His dad, of course, the legendary Costas Tszyu, who fought Ricky Hatton famously over here, but who had an absolutely stunning career before that fight. One to look out for. We'll look to see where he goes next, if he gets the actual full title shot next, or does he have to wait?
Yeah, I mean, still don't know what's going on necessarily with the Charlo quote unquote hand injury. Is it still there? Is it not? It looks like, I mean, I think the plan was always going to be for them to move up. So I think Jamel's going to move to 160 and Jamal's going to move to 168, and that's where they're going to campaign moving forward. So I don't think he's going to get his chance at Charlo, unfortunately, but he will pick up. Well, I guess he'll just be crowned the champ, and then he'll have to take on the first mandatory. They'll appoint a mandatory, and his first defense will be a mandatory, not a voluntary. So that looks like the way it's going to go. I know that's not what he wants, but ultimately it is what it is, as you like to say. Yeah, I'm not really going to speak too much on that. There was not really much to say. However, I did like the fact that it was a very short left hook. He didn't even put power into it. He just followed momentum, and it was a little bit of torque. That's all it took. A little bit of torque and rotation, and yeah, Ocampo slumped on the ring rope. So yeah, overall, to me, it was an easy night's work. I mean, and the fact it was only less than a round, there's no reason. And he's a guy that likes to be active anyway. He likes to sort of be fighting every two to 3 months. I think last year him only fighting once, or I think he fought twice overall, but he used to fight him 4 or 5 times. So I think he didn't even like that. And obviously that's a PBC special. So the fact that he's able to get 2 fights in already, and he's barely gone the distance in this one, there's absolutely no reason for him not to be fighting again come, say, September, and then maybe even again in December, or even October in the States, and then December again back in Australia, Auckland or Sydney or whatever. So yeah, look, he done his thing. No problems there. The gulf between him and Charlo is definitely a lot smaller now than it was 2 fights ago, just because he's, number one, he's got that experience. Number two, we don't know what Charlo would be like with the hand. Is it the same strength? Is he still that same beast that he maybe would have been? And then that fight with Tony Harrison sort of stood him in good stead in terms of how to sort of navigate around someone longer and rangier than you in the ring, who also has a bit of pop, and how to navigate that and sort of come through the other side. And then, you know, the Ocampo thing, as he said, quite jovially in the ring. Spence, I did it quicker than you did. You know, so Charlo, come avenge, almost avenge your boy. Like, I'm doing what your boy is doing, but I'm doing it better. And that's his kind of angle to get the fight. So we'll see what happens ultimately. But yeah, big up to Tszyu, and at least he's doing what you need to do. He's not sitting on his mandatory or his WBO interim status, a bit like Joe Joyce. He's taking fights. And he's, whether they're the hardest or not, he's being active, and there's nothing that beats activity. So big up to Ocampo.
Indeed. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think that sort of ends our review of fights over the past weekend. There is one little matter that I did want to mention, because I did watch Monday Night Smoke last night, and I wasn't able to see the chat, but I was able to see a little bit of what was said in relation to this little thing.
Okay, Tony's gone off script. Let's see. Oh,
here we go.
Okay.
And it seemed everyone was getting in their feelings about, oh my God, what idiot made this rankings? Oh, why was the person allowed to even talk about boxing? And it's like, do you guys not realize that this is nothing to do with someone sitting in an office going, oh, I think Liam Smith's a better boxer than Tyson Fury? It's all to do with algorithm.
Yes, it's points based. It's points based. It's about the people you've been in the ring with. You get a certain level of points for each thing. Wins versus losses, how you looked in the loss. Points just get tallied up, and most of the time on BoxRec, the person with the most fights usually ends up on the top. Whether even if their opponents aren't the hardest ones, they normally will get the points just due to accumulation of fights. So I don't look at, whereas BoxRec used to be very credible, they changed something in the algorithm which messed up a lot of things. And when they took away a lot of the legacy people, it messed up a lot of rankings. But ultimately, you really don't look at BoxRec for who's better than who. You just look at it for who fought who.
That's exactly the point that I wanted to bring to the table today, because I felt like nobody was able to break that down properly last night. I did see someone named Zorrilla or Zorrita in the chat mentioned about the algorithm, but nobody on the show mentioned it, and I felt it was something that we needed to do. Whereas most other pound for pound or rankings are somebody sitting down and just putting in their subjective opinion on who's top and who's middle and who's bottom, this one is actually algorithm based. It's all to do with metrics, and therefore there's no if, buts, or maybes. Liam Smith is at the top because he's had more fights than the rest of them.
Pretty much.
But that they're not. I don't think BoxRec will ever try and say, "Oh, this is the accurate based on performance or who's got titles." No, this is purely data driven. And with that, I am done.
All right.
Let's bring the ticker tapes up. I'll take that away.
Yeah, as you guys can see, BaseDaKID, the hardcore casual, did some decent numbers over the weekend. I think for the first time in a while, I put out 3 videos in one day, which is, don't get used to it, but it seemed to be good quality because they had a decent number of views, all of them. Weekend wrap, haven't done any this week yet, but there will be a video up tomorrow, as always. Yeah, and then there will be basis picks on Saturday coming up. There might be another basis talks with another special guest over the weekend. So we'll wait and see. Next week, potentially, there could be someone nice on the breakdown. I don't want to mention it just yet in case it doesn't come over the line. But in a couple of weeks' time, we will have a very, very big guest. Within the next sort of 3 weeks. And that one, we will be promoting a couple of weeks in advance to make sure that everyone tunes in. But when I tell you it's a big guest, like, yeah, they're boxing royalty and international as well. So
excellent.
keep your eyes open.
So yeah, guys, if you haven't already done so, do get over Bases Talks, a new element to his platform on YouTube. Excellent interviews, some really good content. Get over there, subscribe, and hit the like button. If you haven't done so already, do the same down here as well. My own social media is Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Look up Pugilistic Boy on most of them, apart from Instagram, where it's Pugilistic Boy. And that is us. So last few comments, let me see. New Orleans Moses, Liam Smith over Tyson Fury. Yeah, as you probably weren't listening to what I was saying. Yeah. Okay, so we're done. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us.
That's been the breakdown. And yeah, myself and Tony will be back next week. Hopefully, because there's not a huge amount on. So, like I said, there may be a guest to fill the time. But if not, there will definitely be one within sort of the next 3 to 4. And again, like I said, it's a big one. So thank you very much for watching. Make sure you tune in, like and subscribe if you haven't already. Get those likes up, get that view count up. And yeah, we will see you next week. Peace.
Take care, guys.